Hello, everyone, and welcome into a special late night edition of the Fantasy Football Universe. I am Aaron St.Denis at FF Mad Scientist, joined by Jeremy Shulman at FF_Rebel. I have no idea what country or city he's broadcasting from tonight. You're in a different city every night, I swear.
I wanted to do the draft from Vegas. We were in Vegas last night, but we ended up in Malibu. This is the end of a ridiculous dream trip. But happy to jump on here and talk about some crazy draft landing spots for my guy Ben Sinnott and others.
I did see that. We're getting towards the end here. We got on just in time to end it. It's not. There's 20 picks left or so, but we just see, what did I say? Jermaine Burton goes off the board, 80th overall to the Bengals. That's nice. That's a good one. I feel like we hadn't had an offensive player in quite some time, so that's nice. I don't even know where to start here. I've been focusing mainly on my write-ups for the IDP players because it seems like we haven't had all that many fantasy relevant players go here. What are your thoughts so far?
Well, the second round is crazy. I mean, first I'll talk about my Patriots. Obviously, we started with Drake May, at the third overall. But now we go ahead and trade back 3 picks, pass up on Ladd McConkey for Jalen Polk. I mean, for me, that's not worth moving up about 25 picks in the maybe even less in the 4th round of the draft to pass up on Ladd for Polk. I know some people, including Matt Harmon, love the fit in New England, but for me, Polk it doesn't offer anything incredibly different than what the Patriots already have. I would have preferred a speed guy there, Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin. Maybe that's a little bit too early for those guys given their concerns, but I wanted somebody to open up the field in New England. So that one stood out for me. But speaking of Ladd McConkey, the Chargers trade up at the beginning of the 2nd round to go get him. That's an amazing fit for him. I know he wasn't utilized to his full potential in Georgia, especially with Brock Bowers there and the offense that they were running. But this guy looks like he could be a superstar and lands in the perfect spot with limited competition. So those wide receivers at the top of the draft, and including Keon Coleman, who went first today to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, those 2 guys at the top, and even Jalen Polk have some appeal. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's the receivers at the top of the draft in round 2. How about you?
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't like Polk at all, and I definitely don't like him when his teammate McMillan was still on the board. I guess we can run through this quickly since we're a bit late getting to it, since I had some issues to get through here with my kid. Started off at the 201. We had Keon Coleman and Ladd McConkey go back-to-back to the Bills and Chargers. Then next up was the 5th pick was Polk to the Patriots. I'm going to skip over the defense and tackles. There's a lot of them.
Yep.
We went all the way down to pick 14 of the 2nd round, where Jonathan Brooks went to the Panthers. As of now, there's 2 running backs off the board. One more went. Benson went, right?
Benson to Arizona. Yep.
So then we've got wide receiver Adonai Mitchell goes to the Colts 20th. That's a big fall for him. Followed by Sinnott to the Commanders at 21 in the 2nd round. Actually, what is that overall? 53 overall.
Yep.
So that's all for the 2nd round. So there was what's that? 7 offensive or fantasy relevant players there. Then we are about halfway through the 3rd. It starts off with Malachi Corley to the Jets, Trey Benson to the Cardinals, and we go a long run here of tackles, and we have our 3rd fantasy relevant player, Jermaine Burton, 80th overall, 16th in the 3rd round to the Bengals. So after a great 1st round, we have 3 fantasy relevant players going in the 3rd round, and I think it was 7 or 8 in the 2nd round. So it's kind of slim pickings. It's been a ton of tackles, and all those IDP players who slipped in the draft, they are going now.
Yeah.
I liked, as far as actual football goes, I liked what the Lions did. They ended up with Terrion Arnold paired with Ennis Rakestraw. Definitely like that. So I also liked, who was it? Was it the Eagles? Who did the Eagles get?
Yes. The 2 more corners, right? It was
Cooper DeJean and Cooper DeJean.
Mitchell. Yeah.
That's deadly.
Yeah, I mean, both of those teams picking up corners with as set as they are relatively on the offensive end, that's just going to make them even more deadly as a contender. The issue that we have in fantasy with that is if they are going to immediately come in and improve that passing defense, we could see Jared Goff and that offensive passing game struggle a little bit. Same thing in Philadelphia for fantasy purposes. Obviously, it's great for the real life NFL teams.
My top 4 cornerbacks on the board went to 2 different teams. That's real good if you were an Eagles or Lions fan and looking to beef up your defense, which both were. They both had 2 of the better offenses, and they were 2 of the best teams in the NFC, but they both struggled as far as defense goes. So getting the 2 of the 4 best corners that I had on my board is nice. Not a whole lot of fantasy takeaways. Like, we'll run through some of these. Burton to the Bengals. I maybe like Debro loves him. I'm not sure. I'm assuming this is a replacement for Higgins in mind here. What do you think of Burton to the Bengals?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think at this point, the Bengals missed the boat on trading T. Higgins. He seems like he's certainly not happy with the situation there. He hasn't been involved in contract talks, so he says. So if that's really the case, and the Bengals are looking to move on from him, maybe during the training camp or something like that to get some value, they missed out on the big value here in the draft. So Jermaine Burton could be a replacement, but let's assume for a second T. Higgins stays. Jermaine Burton maybe kind of coming in and playing that Tyler Boyd-ish role to start. He can go in the slot. We know Jamar Chase can easily shift into the slot and work outside. So it's kind of a movable chess piece there. I love the pick, especially if T. Higgins stays, because if they can get him happy, get winning games, this team has a potential to challenge Kansas City. The problem is Kansas City drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round, and it could be real trouble for anybody else in the AFC to deal with KC.
We have another offensive lineman here. Third round, 81st overall. The Seahawks take guard Christian Haynes out of UConn. So yet another another pick that is not fantasy relevant. We'll scroll up and we'll talk, I guess, the only other 2 here in the third round. Malachi Corley to the Jets, I like, and Trey Benson to the Cardinals, I like. I feel like this pushes Trey Benson to the end of the first round of Superflex drafts and bumps up Corley somewhere into the beginning of the second half, depending, because like at this point, we've got 20 picks left. If a few other running backs don't go, I don't know, like we might have 2 borderline 1-2 running backs and then nothing for a while because day 3 draft capital is not where it's at. So I think we've got 2 top 16 players here in Corley and Benson for Superflex. What do you think about Benson and Corley? Oh, I stand corrected. The Rams are taking Michigan running back Blake Corum at 83.
Ooh.
So go back to Corley and Benson, and then I guess you can hit that one too if you want.
Yeah, so let's talk about Malachi Corley first. That's really interesting. We know Randall Cobb came over last year with designs to play with Aaron Rodgers. Corley is kind of a one-for-one Randall Cobb replacement in terms of what Randall Cobb, the role he would have filled in that offense. The difference is obviously Corley's got the juice. Throughout the process, people have been calling him Debo Light. I'm not going to go that far to comp him to Debo Samuel, but he does run hard. He is a short area kind of yak monster. So it's really interesting the things they're going to be able to do with him alongside Garrett Wilson. And then help me out. Who did they signed Mike Williams, right?
Yeah.
So if you have Mike Williams running the go routes, right, on the outside, and you have Garrett Wilson kind of as the X running the intermediate and doing everything that he needs to do, Corley fills that like intermediate role because the Jets really don't have a tight end. So that's really nice for fantasy. The fact that the Jets don't have who do they have? Who is the guy from Minnesota? Who's their tight end right now in the Jets? I can't remember his name.
Irv Smith. No. It's
flowing hair. I don't know why I can't remember his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
It's late at night for me.
But that's the thing, right? Is like, Conklin, right? Conklin could serve that role, but Corley is now more interesting, at least in the long term. Maybe not this year, but I think you're right. I think he's kind of a back end second round type of guy. Certainly early third round. you're going to snap up Corley if he exists there for you. And then you mentioned Trey Benson on the Cardinals. We have an aging James Conner. I mean, Trey Benson was my RB1. He's still up there. It depends on Jonathan Brooks' health, of course. And you mentioned Blake Corum now going to the Rams. But Trey Benson has the best opportunity of all of these backs immediately because James Conner has a year left, if that. So I love Benson. I love the landing spot.
To stick with the Cardinals, we did skip one, the 82nd pick, and this is interesting. The third tight end off the board is not Jatavian Sanders. It's Tip Riemann, and he goes to Arizona, who has arguably the tight end one in Dynasty. Not sure about that. What are your thoughts there on Tip Riemann, the combine standout, going to a place where they have a good young stud tight end? What's the point of this pick?
I have no idea because they need a wide receiver. You know, they're probably not too happy with the wideouts on the board at the moment. But I don't think Tip Riemann is going to offer anything for them or for us from a fantasy perspective. Trey McBride is my tight end 3. He probably could be a tight end 2 in Dynasty at the moment. You know, Sam Laporta has got to be locked in tight end 1, at least for me at the moment. But yeah, I love that I love Tip Riemann in Arizona for Trey McBride, right? Because he's really not going to steal anything away. Like you mentioned, he is a Raz monster at the combine. All right. So he's a big athletic freak guy, but he's also a big body, right? So you're going to be able to have him and use him more as a blocker than you would Trey McBride, who's better off kind of split out as well. So I love that for them. And then you add Benson, you add weapons around Kyler Murray. We need more receivers in Arizona, so I don't know what they're going to do here. But yeah, I think that's good news for Trey McBride.
When you looked for a place to stay on vacation, did you just call and say, "Find me a place full of assholes who honk the horn every 3 seconds," or like how did that work?
When we pulled in, there was a fire a couple of doors down, and the group of us rented this spot, and we were concerned that the fire was actually in the place that we rented. We got lucky there, but no, I was trying to be the asshole that was going to give everyone a view of the California coastline. Unfortunately, I couldn't troll you that bad today because the Wi-Fi didn't work on the roof. But.
Oh, lovely. So I guess we'll go through the second rounders here. We'll go with the lone running back selected. In the second, it is, the Steelers are taking Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson at 84. I guess before we jump into the second, you can take that one. So he jumps up the board because the Steelers always hit on wide receivers. So that's interesting. What are your thoughts there?
This is massive. I'm trying to think of who they have outside of George Pickens in that wide receiver room right now.
Calvin Austin.
That is relevant, right? Like Van Jefferson. Like no one, right? So that's massive because Pat Freiermuth has proven that he's not necessarily a target hog. He could become a favorite target of Russell Wilson. We don't exactly know how that's going to shake out. But if you have George Pickens playing the intermediate to deep passing game, and you have Roman Wilson roaming the middle with Pat Freiermuth, because we know that Najee's capable. We know that Jaylen Warren is a very good receiving back. But now you have that final piece of the passing game. Look, is Arthur Smith going to utilize the passing game as much as we would want him to? We don't know. But Roman Wilson is a really interesting now PPR play for – this is getting to be bullshit.
Is that honking or car alarms?
No, there's just literally because of this fire and the hundreds of fire trucks that showed up, it's just backed up for miles right in front of our door. So, but Roman Wilson, man, he's a really interesting PPR play. And I almost like Roman Wilson now over Malachi Corley, who we just talked about, because there's more opportunity for him. I think he has a bit more wiggle and route running ability, certainly, than Malachi Corley does, and he won't have to be schemed open. He can just kind of run free over the middle, make his moves on the defender, and then be the easy short to intermediate target for Russell Wilson. So Roman Wilson for me is firmly now entrenched in the second round. Probably, if I had to guess right now, 207, 208 is where I'd be comfortable taking him, and maybe even earlier.
I think he's going to be higher than that for me, but I'm writing this down on the fly here, taking notes.
Yeah.
So what I had just noticed is that one of my predictions just came through of why we sell day 3 running backs, because it looks like another Michigan or former Michigan running back in Blake Corum just killed Kyren Williams. Remember what everyone said? Blake Blake Corum went to the Rams. Kyron Williams. He got Ken Walker. Zach Charbonnet last year.
Yeah, but the one thing I'll say is, right, with that, Charbonnet didn't really materialize as that threat year one. Doesn't mean it won't happen eventually, but look, Kyron Williams never should have had the workload that he had last year. And anyone who was kind of banking on that to happen again pre-draft, I get it, but this was always a possibility, right? Blake Corum is not a Kyron Williams type of big body who's going to necessarily threaten him on the goal line. But I think he has the ability to take a fair amount of touches away from Kyron, especially when we're talking about some of the later downs.
I cannot wait to go search for that bold prediction or sell high article on Fantasy Pros we did and post my receipts on that one, because I've been pumping the sell Kyron,
Yeah. It was always sell Kyron, yeah.
For the last month and a half. Actually, it's been longer than that. But all right, so let's get back. Corum to the Rams absolutely sucks for fantasy. You are correct, Jesse. Sorry. Okay, so back to where we were. Did you dive into what you thought about Jonathan Brooks being the first running back off the board to the Panthers? What did you think? Did you break that down or?
No, that's a fantastic landing spot for Brooks. I think we all know that Miles Sanders is the ghost of himself at this point. Moved away from Philly, just never put it together last year. There was maybe some hope for Chuba Hubbard, but Jonathan Brooks, assuming health, right? Assuming he's recovered, he's even 90% of what he was at Texas. Will challenge Chuba right away, and has the potential to kind of snatch up a majority of the work in year one. So that's super interesting. The problem is, I don't know that the Panthers are able to turn it around significantly in 1 year from being the worst team in football, right? They have a new staff in place. Bryce Young, I think, still has potential. I know we're down on him, but you got to give him a little bit of a break, I think, to see what he can do in year two. All of that said, Jonathan Brooks has the potential here to, grab 35 to 40% of the workload year one easy right away. And then throughout the second half of the year, right? This is kind of what JJ Zachariason and a lot of other people talk about, these rookie running backs. And the second half of the year is really where you see them kind of explode. They finally learned the offense. They have the ability to kind of take on more workload, and then their talent can shine through, right? Brooks is a significantly more talented back than Hubbard. We know Miles Sanders is basically dust. So I love this spot for him. I still think I'm Trey Benson over Brooks, but it's really close given the disparity between their draft slots. It's almost a full round later that Benson was taken from Brooks.
Do you have a pillow next to you? Is that what you need? You have a pillow there? Okay, you're going to need it for a sec. You're going to need it. We're going to talk about second round Ben Sinnott, and you need the pillow to hide your erection. So what are your thoughts on this?
Oh my God, dude. We have been talking about Ben Sinnott longer than anyone that I know has been talking about Ben Sinnott. You and me specifically watched the tape of Ben Sinnott and fell in love. I know Jesse wasn't far behind. I mean, the double FU has been on Ben Sinnott forever. And the fact that he went in the middle of the second round is phenomenal draft capital. There's really no competition. I think maybe you're worried about Terry McLaurin, perhaps. You might be worried about Jaden Daniels and the fact that he's coming in as a rookie quarterback. But I'm not worried about Cole Turner. I'm not worried necessarily about Zach Ertz. In fact, I think it's great for Ben Sinnott's value that Zach Ertz is in Washington and can provide year one tutelage. That's not going to last. The Ertz experiment will be lucky if he lasts the full year healthy and still in the NFL. So Ben Sinnott for me is clearly the tight end 2. Obviously, is the tight end 2 for the NFL. And in fantasy, I'm still happy with taking Ben Sinnott, especially in tight end premium leagues, in the middle of the second round. It might not happen immediately for him, but then again, we don't love Brock Bowers' landing spot either because he's got to deal with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and a iffy quarterback situation as well. So Ben Sinnott for me is right where I think we all expected him to be in terms of his fantasy value. Washington, I don't necessarily love that, but the draft capital you can't argue with. It's amazing.
Do these teams know they're allowed to draft players who don't play for Michigan? That's the third Wolverine in a row. Zach Zinter, guard, goes to Cleveland.
Fair.
Okay, before we talk about the rest of the second round, which is basically a handful of receivers. What are your thoughts on us being 85 picks in with Troy Franklin still on the board?
This was my concern with Troy Franklin is, for a long time, I think almost all of us have been Xavier Worthy over Troy Franklin, and that panned out. Jesse had been Ricky Pearsall over almost every one of these guys, not named Roma Dunze, and that panned out. So I think we had a lot of kind of hits in our wide receiver evaluations, but Troy Franklin for us was significantly lower down our boards than I think others had him. In fact, I'm not even sure he made our top 12, or maybe he was our 112.
I think he was 12. I can't remember. But I think he was 12 by me. I think that's my miss so far. I wasn't as out on Troy Franklin. I think he's just in that group with A.D. Mitchell, but apparently the NFL was lower on Mitchell and Franklin. So that looks like a miss by me, which is why he probably got into our top 12.
But what I'll say is the production was there, right? It was amazing. But I'm not going to necessarily give that full credit to Bo Nix, although he went 12th or 13th.
49ers go credit. Tackle. Sorry, 49ers go tackle. Dominic Puny at Kansas. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but what I'll say is, the production was there. The problem with Troy Franklin is he's almost a one-trick pony, right? His routes are fine, but he's a speed guy, and he'll toast you on the outside. He'll burn you deep. And, Nix had the arm and the ability, and Oregon had the scheme to get him there, right? But for me, Franklin should be gone by now, but the fact that he isn't kind of just goes to show that the rest of the NFL is kind of in on this idea that Troy Franklin doesn't necessarily have the receiving chops that Malachi Corley or Roman Wilson does. And that really needs to tell us something in fantasy that, we know he has the ability to produce. We know he can be a burner, and we know he can track the ball very well deep. The problem that you run into is you can get these, certainly not on the level of Deshaun Jackson, but almost like a modern day Gabe Davis type of lines where you can blow up for one game because you catch a long touchdown pass, but then you can go 2-3 games where you do absolutely nothing, maybe 1 for 20. And you help to extend the offense, but you don't necessarily provide that consistency for fantasy. So at this point, the fact that Troy Franklin isn't, is still on the board, unless he goes to a phenomenal spot like Buffalo, who still could use that deep threat, I'm probably not looking at him until round 3, end of round 2.
It says the pick is in for the Cowboys, although they went to commercial. Do they finally pull the trigger on a running back here? This is the fourth pick in a row they've had in 3 rounds where I've said, surely this is a running back, and they haven't gone running back. Who's left? Jalen Wright?
There's 2 guys that I like. No, Marshawn Lloyd is still there.
Marshawn Lloyd, thank you, Marshawn Lloyd.
Love Marshawn Lloyd there. I know Jerry Jones was hoping for Jonathan Brooks. That didn't happen. Marshawn Lloyd for me is the guy to go to Dallas. Jalen Wright, if you add Jalen Wright, you're just adding another one of these guys, right? Who do you have? Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowdle, right? We're not doing that, right? Go ahead and get the final bell cow that exists in Marshawn Lloyd and ride him into the ground and bring in Zeke Elliott and help tutor him.
So we've got Carolina with Brooks, Benson to Arizona. Say this pick is Marshawn Lloyd to Dallas. Does he become your rookie RB1, or where does he rank among those 3? Assuming this pick is him, which it's not yet. We're just speculating.
It's really close for me. They're all in a nice little bundle. I would probably it's so hard.
I think
at the moment.
I think I
gotta
like
go
him
Brooks.
better. I think it's him for me.
I gotta go Brooks at 1, only because of the mid-second round capital. It's insane. But we said too, right? For anyone who's listening, like we said that Jonathan Brooks would have been the RB1 if not for this injury that he suffered. And clear cut, the tape is amazing. The production was there. So the fact that he goes where he goes to a RB needy team who's, as long as he's healthy, going to feed him as much as possible, that's fantastic. So I will put Brooks RB1 with. If Lloyd goes here to Dallas, it's Lloyd 2 and Benson 3. But for me, those guys are probably neck and neck.
All right, so let's run through the wide receivers here. Let me check. In the second round, anyways, we got 1, 2, 3, and then a long run, 4 of them. Okay, so let's play rank the 4 second-round receivers. We go A.D. Mitchell to the Colts, last out of them. I'm going to do them in reverse order because I'm scrolling
Okay.
up. So A.D. Mitchell last to the Colts, Polk to the Patriots, McConkey to the Chargers, Coleman to the Bills. The first two have to be miles ahead, right? It's got to be McConkey, Coleman, then a mile back to Polk and Mitchell, right?
For me, yeah. I mean, I think Coleman landed in the best possible spot.
Do you
that
have
he
him
could
over
have landed in.
McConkey?
No, no way. And
I
I
didn't
didn't
think
by a
so.
mile.
Okay.
But here's the issue, right? Keon Coleman has consistently struggled to separate, and that's really his biggest knock. He's a fantastic contested catch receiver. He has the ability to go up and high point the football and get it. He's terribly athletic. Like there's a lot of really great things that Keon Coleman does. The one thing that he does not do well, or exceptionally rather, is separate, and that's my issue. Whereas Lab McConkey can do that, and he landed in a place where there's absolutely zero competition for targets. I don't care if the Chargers run the ball 700 times this year because they still need to throw it, 400 times, and there's nobody else on the damn field who deserves targets next to Lad McConkey. You think Quentin Johnston is going to steal targets from Lad McConkey? Do you think Joshua Palmer is going to steal targets from Lad McConkey? Do you think Stone Smart or whoever the hell they're running out at tight end? Did they sign Gesicki? I forget who the Chargers signed in the offseason, but it doesn't matter. There's no competition for targets for Lad.
It's a linebacker. Sorry,
we
Dallas
know,
goes linebacker.
Oh, wow. We know that Justin Herbert is more than capable, in fact, a good quarterback. They're also building an offensive line for him and reinforcing that, which is great. Lad McConkey is an absolute stud. He's the wide receiver 1 in the second round.
Okay.
And then I agree with you. I like Keon Coleman, probably A.D. Mitchell, and then Polk.
Okay, so it's Maurice Liufu from linebacker Notre Dame goes 387 to the Cowboys. Packers are rushing to the board here to draft someone. It doesn't say who, but the pick is in. Okay, so we're probably going to leave McConkey and Coleman. But so then do Jermaine Burton in the third to the Bengals or Roman Wilson to the Steelers in the third. Do either of them pass A.D. Mitchell or Jalen Polk? I think for me, Polk and Mitchell fall to below Roman Wilson. I think Roman Wilson becomes my 3 of the day 2 receivers.
Yeah, he might. And even Jermaine Burton is super interesting. He's not going to hit year 1.
He might be my 4.
We know T. Higgins is out the door. If not this year, then next year, right? Because they haven't the Bengals, they haven't really made any contract plans with him. So yeah, Burton could be a 4. And I'm going to track my earlier statement. I think Polk is, ahead of A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell is going to streak the line.
Hold up. Sorry to interrupt, but this one's good. Packers at 88th overall take Marshawn Lloyd. How do you feel about
that's
that?
Really good. Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible for his fantasy value, but that's so good for the team.
Yeah, that kills him and Josh Jacobs, I think.
Yeah, that team is a juggernaut. I'll say this. Josh Jacobs looked a bit like a shell of himself. I'm going to chalk that up to the absolute dumpster fire in Las Vegas last year with, was it Josh McDaniels? Jettison midseason, the whole coaching staff and team in turmoil. But yeah, Marshawn, I still think Jacobs has juice, but Marshawn Lloyd is perfect. We know A.J. Dillon was dead, so I'm sorry if you had any belief or faith that A.J. Dillon coming back would have any value. That's not the case. Marshawn Lloyd is the clear RB2 on that team immediately with the potential to be the RB1 by midseason. I really like him, but I agree with you. His fantasy value is not what we wanted it to be.
I think this is a real problem because now we're at 4 running backs drafted, right? So the 4 running backs drafted, I like Brooks and his landing spot. I like Benson in his landing spot. I don't love the situation Corum or Lloyd goes to. So as of now, I have 2 in the top tier of running backs and a big gap forming. Lloyd just went from a borderline RB1, RB2 to me. He has just fallen. He is now in the second tier of running backs for me, all because of, that's a bad landing spot. I don't normally I don't like to overvalue landing spot for as much like with wide receiver, but with running backs, it's, oh, well, he's going to be a backup for year one. Well, we've seen with Tony Pollard, some of these guys, by the time they get to their shot, they have 1 year and then they're toast because they're 27. Yep. So, okay, so I guess we'll play that game then. You want to rank the 4 running backs that have gone in Corum, Lloyd, Benson, and Brooks? It's Benson and Brooks in some manner at the top, right?
It's Brooks for me. It's very close, but yeah, I agree with you. There's a clear top 2. It's Brooks and then Benson, because Brooks will have the immediate shot this year. I think James Conner is resilient enough to hold off Benson for a majority of the first half of the year. I think Brooks can grab that job from day one, assuming health. So yeah, Brooks, Benson, clear tier, and then it's gotta be. I like Lloyd. I mean, that's a great landing spot long term for him. And if Josh Jacobs is toast, I mean, Lloyd could easily become RB1 out of nowhere. So it's Lloyd for me. And then Corum, I mean, Kyron is young. He's proven he can do it. They're obviously not going to give Kyron the full load now with Corum there. Yeah. But Corum's a clear. So it's Lloyd 3, tier again, and then Corum 4.
But that's a shame. Like, I don't think that Lloyd landing spot is terrible, but it's bad enough that it puts him a tier below, a tier above Corum, like you said. The Bucs just picked at 3.89, Tyke Smith, safety out of Georgia. On the clock is the Cardinals, who are about to pick. 1 sec. We'll see who this is. At 390th overall. Cornerback Elijah Jones out of Boston College. 1 sec. Let me write these down. I got to have all this written down. So.
My question is who's left? I mean, we know Troy Franklin. We've already discussed him. We have Jalen Wright, who has the possibility to go today. He's an interesting, maybe third down type guy. We don't think he's going to get the full workload, but if he lands somewhere like a Jalen Wright or a Will Shipley on the Kansas City Chiefs, to me is absolute PPR money in the bank for a wide receiver. We want to see that because Pacheco has the ability to catch the football, but I would love to see a pass catching back go in there and take on the Jerick McKinnon role. We know that's been valuable for fantasy. As far as wide receivers, you mentioned Jalen McMillan earlier. He's still available.
Baker.
Troy Franklin, we said. Who else is there?
Javon Baker.
Javon Baker's a good one. He's got enough size and enough skill to certainly be in the conversation. Is there anybody else who we missed wide receiver?
I can't remember. I've had a busy week. I'm looking here. So we're at pick 90, 92. So there aren't that many. Okay, so like the Bucs don't really need a running back or a receiver. The Ravens could use a receiver. The Eagles don't really need one. The Bills took one already. The Jags took one already. The Bengals, Steelers took one already. The Rams, we're running out of wide receiver landing spots here. The Commanders.
Yeah. The Cardinals need one for sure.
The Cardinals already picked.
Yeah, they need no. Oh, yeah, you're saying for the rest of the day.
Yeah, for the rest of this round here. And as far as running backs go, okay, Bucs, no. Well, Bucs already took someone else, but okay. Oh no, sorry, the Bucs get to pick again, but they don't really need one. Ravens, I could see taking one, not Philly. No running back in Buffalo, Jacksonville, Cincy, Pittsburgh, Rams, Command. Who can you see taking a running back here?
It wouldn't be right. I don't think. No, there's no way. I would be very surprised if Pittsburgh took a running back this high in the draft. I think they have other needs.
That's my point. I think we're done with running back for the day.
Baltimore has the potential. Baltimore has the potential. We know they lost Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. We know that Keaton Mitchell is coming off of a brutal injury. May not be ready for the start of the season, but could be. And we know that Derrick Henry is aging, right? So they took that gamble. They desperately need kind of backup running backs in there. Justice Hill was capable, but if you can get, the problem is we know this running back class is poor, and that's panning out in terms of what's happening in the draft here. So
I hate that Twitter is so far ahead of the actual stream because I'll be sitting here and it's like, oh, the pick is in for Green Bay. Oh, it's someone I wrote down 3 players ago. We already knew that. We've already discussed it. It's just their feed is so freaking far behind Ari Maroff or Yates or whoever's in the green room back there. But I don't see all that many spots here. towards in the last 10 picks here of teams that need offensive players, really. Do we see, how about if Spencer Rattler here? Bucks, no. Ravens, Eagles, Bills. Stop me if you hear anyone you think could take Rattler. Jags, Bengals, Steelers, Rams, Commanders. No more quarterbacks either, right?
The Rams are interesting, but we know they took who was the guy they took last year? Stetson Bennett, right?
But he's in alcohol rehab.
Yeah. But do you want another Stetson? Do you want another Stetson Bennett in the building? I don't know. They've had so many of these Spencer Rattler types already. But the Rams could. It seems a little early for him, but you never know. And then the first team you mentioned, who was that? Who's the first team?
Tampa, Baltimore.
I mean, who is the number 2? The guy they drafted from Florida a few years ago?
Trask.
Yeah, isn't it Trask as their number 2? I mean, he's not doing the job. I mean, Rattler would be interesting there just to kind of cover your bases with Baker, and we know Baker has been super inconsistent to the point where he's been passed around to a number of teams. I wouldn't hate that move for the Bucks. The problem is they have so many holes elsewhere. So yeah, I agree with you. It's probably not quarterback. In fact, the biggest name that I'm looking here to drop that has potential is Jatavian Sanders, who we know he's an athletic freak. We're not super high on him, but he has the potential to go in the 3rd round. He's looked good on tape. And if one of these teams, like, for example, what about the Rams? We know that they have there were rumors circulating that they were looking to trade up. I believe the Jets also were looking to trade up and make moves once and calling teams in the 1st round. Once Brock Bowers went off the board, those phone calls stopped. So we know the Rams are looking to kind of insulate Tyler Higbee and his injury, and he might not be ready for the start of the season. So Jatavian Sanders could be an interesting pick for them here. Because I can't really think of another tight end that's worthy of a 3rd round pick. But Sanders has potential and could be developed, especially if Matthew Stafford is throwing them the football.
The Packers have 2 picks here in 3 spots. They picked Tyron Hopper. Just a sec. Let me double check this. I feel like the Packers were just on the clock. They did. It goes Packers, Bucks, Cardinals, Packers, Bucks. Okay. I thought I was having deja vu. Okay, but so that's my point. Looking at the last 10 picks of this round, we may have logged on just in time to not see an offensive player, because looking through these 10 teams here, with the exception of a couple teams maybe needing a tight end, like could the Eagles, could the Bengals, Rams, Commanders already got one. So maybe we see Sanders go, or Theo Johnson, or Jaheim Bell, but we could conceivably, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 picks left. If you told me we're not going to see another offensive player pick tonight, or a skill position player pick tonight, like fantasy relevant player, it would not surprise me.
Agree. I think Jalen McMillan is interesting. He's got the potential to go here. If he goes to somewhere like the Rams and you
Baltimore,
pair him with
did Baltimore take one yet?
To be really fair, that's a phenomenal landing spot for any wide receiver. If that's Jalen McMillan, that's really interesting. The problem is they just re-signed Rashad Bateman, right? So where's that level of belief? Well, no, but it's not.
I know. I said it yesterday. I'm just breaking balls.
No, I totally agree with you. But at the same time, obviously somebody in that building believes in Rashad Bateman. It's not Lamar Jackson, that's for sure. But I don't think that. Man, I'm blanking on names tonight. Who's their number 1 wide receiver in Baltimore?
Flowers.
Yeah, I don't think Flowers is such a target hog that a wide receiver 2 there can't be available. The problem is Mark Andrews is.
His ears are burning. Tampa Bay selects at 92nd overall wide receiver Jalen McMillan. What are your thoughts on that?
I really like that.
Not my favorite landing spot, but.
Well, we know Mike Evans has about a year left. We know that they want to take the pressure off of Rachaad White and his ridiculous receiving volume from a year ago. We don't like that for fantasy. But for reality here, Jalen McMillan is a good fit. We know Chris Godwin. We know Chris Godwin could potentially be out the door. But the problem is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a lot of good young receivers waiting in the wings. And Trey Palmer really showed that he's capable of playing in this league last year. So that's a really interesting pick for them. I'm not sure how he's going to fit in, but Baker Mayfield has a ton of weapons around him now. So that offense could continue to click, and they did pretty decently getting into the playoffs and winning, I think, their first game last season.
McMillan on the Bucks or Polk on, what was it, the Patriots?
I'll go Polk there just because, there's not a ton of competition. And with a developing Drake May, Jalen Polk has the ability or at least the opportunity to become the wide receiver one there if May fixates on him. For Jalen McMillan, I'm going to keep going with that. I love the player, but Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are better talents even at this stage. And Trey Palmer might be. So, I don't love the spot for him.
Okay, we're going to run through some more BPA here while we wait for the Ravens to pick. Quarterback, we've got Rattler left, Milton, Pratt, Travis, Hartman, Leary, Slovis. I don't know. Rattler could be in play here, but I don't think so. Tight end, we've got Sanders, who's certainly in play. Bell, Theo Johnson, Cade Stover, and Dallin Holker are the best of the best left. There's a ton of running backs left, so we won't even go through them. But as far as the wide receivers go, we've got Brendan Rice, Luke McCaffrey, Jacob Cowing, Javon Baker, Johnny Wilson, if you want to call him a receiver, and Jamari Thrash. Also, your sleeper, Malik Washington. Anybody there really interest you? Obviously, Malik Washington.
I was looking at Malik Washington. That's a really interesting fit for him. But I really think, from a football perspective, the Ravens are going to want to go in a different direction. Troy Franklin is the obvious choice here. He's falling, and that speed. That's something that Baltimore does not have. And this was my issue with the Jalen Polk pick for New England. Is that something that the New England Patriots don't have? Is an actual threat to be fast down the field and catch the football, right? Tyquan Thornton is not that. He's not a great receiver and tracker of the football. Troy Franklin is. So if you put Troy Franklin in Baltimore and he's able to stretch the field, he's able to see, 3 to 4 targets a game deep. That doesn't help us for fantasy, but for reality, that opens things up underneath for the guys that we want. Flowers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and if they bring in another wide receiver.
All right, let's see. I want to see what's going on here. Chris Ballard went off on someone. Let me know. Can you hear this when I start playing it?
I don't.
Yep, but turn it up.
It's some of the bullshit that was said on TV. I mean, just a typical fucking, excuse my language, our typical unnamed sources.
Is it loud enough?
Bad interview.
No.
Bullshit.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, I was gonna try and do it, but his feed that's maxed out on my volume. Ari apparently got a really low feed, but apparently he goes off on someone who was criticizing his pick of AD Mitchell. So head over to Ari Maroff. It's a low volume. You might want to listen to it with your headphones on. But apparently he had some 4-letter words to say to the reporter. So the pick is in for Baltimore. It has not been announced just yet. This I feel like this night went by. It did. We got through 2 rounds today faster and about 40 minutes less. I mean, I know we've got a few picks less, but we went to almost midnight last night. Me and Jesse were spent by the end of it. Oh, never mind. This one started at 7. We went longer tonight. Never mind. I forgot we started at 7 tonight, not 8.
One thing I want to mention as we wait for this pick, and feel free to interrupt me here, but yeah, Trey Benson, I think, is going to be a very, polarizing player for many. I think Trey Benson, people didn't love necessarily his tape. Some did, some didn't. I was on the side that did.
I did too.
But in this landing spot, James Conner, has the potential to kind of steal work. Michael Carter has the potential to be a third down back and at least steal some of that volume. So right now there's barriers in his way. I don't mean that Michael Carter is going to consistently and for long-term steal, Benson's touches, but there's barriers in the way immediately. So the problem here that I always face, and I wonder how you feel about this, is, in year one, we don't want to run into a situation where we're drafting a guy like JSN who's buried on the depth chart behind guys who could really sap his production. We love to say that, if they're good enough, they're going to ascend and they're going to break out in year one. But JSN showed on tape that he's good enough. But whether it was the utilization, whether it was the fact that DK is a monster and Tyler Lockett is more than capable, whether it was the fact that Geno Smith just kind of fell off a cliff last year, whatever it was, JSN didn't pan out. But I don't necessarily put that on the player. But we still see his value fall, right? So is it better now to draft Trey Benson at his potential ceiling or wait a year? It's not necessarily the best example of this, but it's possible that he's buried for an entire year.
Before we get into it, Baltimore at 93 selects edge rusher Adisa Isaac out of Penn State. That's great value.
Yeah,
I was thinking
really
him at the beginning of the second, but for me, if we're going to talk redraft for a second here, wow, did I switched screens? It got dark at your place in a quick hurry. Hey,
it did.
Yeah, sorry. If we're going to talk redraft for a second here, I think it's Jonathan Brooks as the RB1 in this class by a mile. Because I think Benson I like, but you're going to rely in year one. You're going to rely on him either, a James Conner injury is certainly likely, but more than likely you're going to have to hope he takes over the job, week 8, week 9. If you're talking straight up for this year, I think so far it's Jonathan Brooks by a mile. I do think he has the potential to do it, but obviously the rookies aren't nearly as valued in redraft. I guess they are, because every year there's a couple of top 12 rookie running backs. So I would have to say my bet would be Brooks right now out of this class if you're talking redraft, because I think, like you said, every other one of the running backs so far has some form of a hurdle in them. I can see the sirens off the back of the wall now. It's the hell are you in a war zone?
Well, if you think about it, right, let's think about these teams as well, right? Jonathan Brooks goes to the worst team in football last year, right? Troy Benson goes into, what were the Cardinals, like the third worst team in football last year?
Something like that.
And then Corum to the Rams, who are a great team, but he's buried by a guy who finishes the RB1 or RB2 overall last year.
I don't think it was that high. I think it was 3 or something, but maybe. Anyway,
crazy.
It was close. Sorry. The Eagles take Jelix Hunt, edge rusher out of Houston Christian. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, they needed him. And then the other guy is Lloyd, who went to the Packers, who's buried on a great team too. So either have guys with opportunities on lesser teams or guys who are completely buried by really good backs on really good teams. And so it's kind of what we all assumed it was. It's not necessarily that these running backs in this class is horrible. It's just the fact that, they're landing in terrible spots as well. And there's not a ton of depth, right? We're not like, unless you're my co-host here, you're not pounding the table for Kamani Vidal, which, to be fair, you might be depending on where he lands, right? So it's, it's not a deep class after these top few guys. So whoever goes next, we all like Jalen Wright, but whoever goes after that, there's very few guys who can actually hold a very strong role here on an NFL team.
Hear me out. I think it got worse. We said this was a weak class and it was going to be separated by whoever got the best draft capital and landing spot. The problem is, with the exception of one guy, we didn't get anyone who got draft capital and a good landing spot. I think we have one obvious winner who has a torn ACL, who's going to find his way into the back end of round 1 in Superflex drafts. Yeah. And then I think everybody else has kind of slid here. I think the running back market in rookie drafts took a big hit today. I think they're all now middle of the second round picks at best. This draft has not been great. Like, I know we got a lot of high end talent early, but our Penix and Nix, like I've heard Nix is going to sneak into the first round here, and we've got a couple of receivers who are going to move up. But if you needed a running back, you are now praying you can get Jonathan Brooks because he's your only option.
Yeah, but here's what I'm doing. I'm trading the, what is it going to be, 110, maybe 110 for Jonathan Brooks. I'm trading the 110 for you can't even say Josh Jacobs anymore, but James Cook. You could trade the 110 pretty easily for James Cook, and maybe even that's a deal I would do if I needed an RB2 on my team, because do I want Jonathan Brooks, who has the potential to break out, or do I want a guy who I know is going to give me solid RB2 value with RB1 upside on a weekly basis? I'll take Cook over the 110.
These guys are in a hurry to get out of here. What are we trying to come in under the clock or something? Buffalo goes Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle out of Duke, and Jacksonville has the pick in, but we went to commercials. So I don't know. It got really, we were hoping for some more clarity as to, everything. There was kind of a range from 1.9 to 2.06. We were hoping for some clarity, but we didn't really get it. The top 8 solidified themselves as an 8. And if anything, maybe we got a definitive 9, 10, 11, 12 in one running back. And then so we got Worthy, Pearsall. If you need a quarterback and you're sold on Bo Nix because of draft capital, but after that, we got a whole bunch of guys who are even more flawed than they were yesterday.
Yeah. And here's the thing about quarterbacks, right? Is we've talked about this with Andrew Cooper about a month ago, right? And I will continue to bring this up on this show to anyone who will listen, because Andrew Cooper did this study and it was revelatory, right? So if you're talking about the order in which quarterbacks are drafted and their performance in fantasy football, Cooper did a deep dive of the last, I don't know, was it 15, 20 years or whatever? It was 300 quarterbacks in his study. And what he did is he said the quarterback 1 off the board, so in this case, Caleb Williams, was responsible for 23% of quarterback 1 seasons in fantasy football. That means QB1 to QB12 overall finish, right? The quarterback 2 drafted off the board was responsible. So in this case, Jaden Daniels was responsible for 20% of quarterback 1 seasons. Then it fell off a cliff. So the quarterback 3, Drake May, in this case, was only responsible for 8%. Quarterback 4, 6%. Quarterback 5, 5%. So when you look at the Drake Mays and the Michael Penixes and JJ McCarthy, even though we love some of these spots, especially for JJ, Bo Nix, right? Even though these guys are going to have opportunity, the issue is, unless this is one of those elite quarterback classes, which we don't know yet, but it might not be, right? Odds are against it. Unless it's one of those elite quarterback classes, you're really going to have trouble finding value outside of Caleb and Heisman winner Jaden Daniels. So for me, I'm really still iffy about taking a Bo Nix in the top of the second round. So that's a big no-go for me.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about me believing in Bo Nix as a first-round talent. It's more about that's how bad the rest of this draft has gone for a fantasy perspective that we're now debating Bo Nix at the end of the first. And I really need this to wrap it up because it sounds like
let's do it.
My kid has no. We can hold on for a few more picks. It sounds like my kid's out of bed now, so he's going to require my attention here, and hopefully he's in the washroom. Hopefully he's not thrown up again. So we'll see. But I'm hoping they're milking the clock here with Jacksonville. So I'm hoping we can fire off the last 4 picks here and wrap this up under an hour. We're at 52 minutes. So I may have a guess. The Jags are about to announce their pick.
If they take someone like Troy Franklin here, that's just going to be muddy as hell. I couldn't imagine them doing that, but I guess anything's possible.
Cornerback Jerrion Jones, Florida State.
All right.
So that makes sense. Since we said it, have we had an offensive player picked? I feel like we had a receiver, right? Oh, Jalen
McMillan, but no.
We were talking about him.
Lloyd was the last one, and then McMillan at 29 to Tampa.
Yeah.
So it's Jacksonville, who we know they just picked a corner. So it's the Bengals left. The Bengals, we know they just picked a wide receiver, right? So they don't need anybody on the offensive end here unless they go running back, which would be interesting here. The Steelers, they could go another wide receiver, but my bet is probably offensive line or defense, maybe a linebacker. And then you have the Rams in Washington. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. It's, other than McMillan, since you called it, it was probably unlikely that we see another fantasy relevant guy. And, we might not have it here in the last 4 picks.
Okay. I am going to cue you up to talk about something for a sec while I go check on him. What is your favorite pick landing spot overall of this entire thing? You can go with the chalk if you want, but who's your favorite guy right now?
I don't know if it's chalk. It very well could be, but it's Xavier Worthy. Pre-process, he was my wide receiver 4. I know at FFU we're very high on him. Here's the thing that you need to know about Xavier Worthy. If you don't already know it, he's not just a speed guy. I know he made the massive headlines running 4.21 at the combine and 40-yard dash. That's phenomenal. It's record-breaking. All of that is amazing. He is speed, right? He's not just a speed guy. Watch the tape at Texas. Xavier Worthy can run routes. He's in the Tyreek Hill mold. I'm not going to sit here and comp him to Tyreek Hill, but he's going to play that role in the offense. And what's super interesting about this is we know he can beat anybody deep. We know Patrick Mahomes has a massive arm. We know Kelsey is aging out. He still has that ability, and he's still going to work underneath. But this is the element that was missing from the Kansas City offense last year, and they still won the championship, is that deep threat. Worthy can not only run deep routes, he can track the ball well deep, and he's a pretty complete receiver. And the NFL just told you that by taking him in the first round. So if you are still thinking that Xavier Worthy is just a speed guy, you're dead wrong. He's not a John Ross, okay, who broke the records. This guy can do it all, and he's still developing. He's 21 years old. So Xavier Worthy is really a guy that you want to target. And for me, he's still my wide receiver 4, and he might even be jumping. I don't know yet, but he might be jumping Brock Bowers. So he's falling in for me he was always at the 109. He may be at the 108 now. In Superflex leagues, you're going to have to get him that high. I say he's gone by 110 for sure, 111 for sure. So you're going to have to pick him that high. I don't think you're wasting a pick. Xavier Worthy is a phenomenal talent and a phenomenal landing spot. So that's the biggest winner for me.
At 97, the Bengals take offensive tackle McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M. So we may be correct here that we are ending the night with the last 12 picks we said with no offense. It's all defense. Yeah. Okay, the question, I know neither of us is probably well-versed enough to talk about this obscure player, but what are your thoughts here on Sanders being on the board still while Tip Riemann is off the board?
That's I know ridiculous.
Tim asked me about him, and I said, "Oh, that's the tight end out of Arizona." And I said, "Oh no, wait, it's the tight end out of Illinois. I can't even remember where he plays." So,
the Jatavian Sanders hype for us at FFU, and we've talked about it for months. We didn't get it right. That kind of came to fruition at the combine when he was just kind of an average Raz guy. He didn't necessarily show anything, remotely elite in terms of impressiveness. And the fact that he was still the tight end 2 for many after the combine was shocking to us. We had Benson not firmly there. The NFL just showed you that that's the case.
Take lock, that's why.
Yeah. Well, Jatavian Sanders now, I mean, if he doesn't go in these next 4 picks, he doesn't have day true draft capital, right? And he's more likely to land on a team with an entrenched starter. So for me, he's probably off my board, except for a dart throw in the late 3rd, early 4th. But even then, I don't know.
This is feeling like Jalen Wittermeyer, who was in the conversation a few years ago for tight end 1, then had a bad combine and went completely off the draft board. So that you would kind of answered my question. In a 3-round draft, assuming he's not one of the last, what do we got, 3 here? Pittsburgh, 3. Assuming he's not one of the last 3 picks, is he off the board in 3-round rookie drafts? Does he go undrafted?
I mean, he was trending that way for me.
He was going
anyway.
Like 308 in ours already.
He's going to need a phenomenal landing spot. He's going to need like an LA Rams, even though they just re-signed
still up,
right?
They're the next pick.
It's very possible, right? Because you think about Puka and Kupp, they, who is it? Demarcus Robinson is there. I like him as a talent, but I think he's about 30 years old, right? He's getting up there in age. Sanders, if he's incorporated into that system, he's not going to pop right away. He might have a few games at the beginning of the year because Higbee is recovering. But Sanders is a guy that you would, draft and hope to hold for maybe a year 2, year 3 breakout when they can kind of integrate him better in the system. Even still, I don't love that landing spot for him, and I really can't think of a spot at the moment. Who's left to draft here? I can't think of a spot at the moment that would really matter for him unless it's wide open.
They just came back from commercial with the Steelers on the clock. It says the pick is in, but of course they've got to milk these last 3 picks.
Yeah, I mean, well, listen, the Steelers are interesting, right? Pat Freiermuth is a bigger body guy. He's the type of guy who can sit in, and they used him this way last year, which is why he kind of fell off for fantasy, who can sit in and help protect the quarterback and block. And if Pat Freiermuth is going to be your inline guy, Jatavian Sanders could kind of play in a Isaiah Likely-esque role, especially with the limited weapons they have there on
this is a good pick for Pittsburgh. NC State linebacker Peyton Wilson. He was
that makes really a ton of sense.
I'm seeing tweets of someone asking Cooper DeJean a ridiculous question, but I can't see who it is. Gotta love it. Some of us
Crazy.
can't get media credentials to get to this, but others go and they ask asinine questions. Gotta love
Right.
it. Gotta love it. All right, so we have 2 left. Rams, Commanders. Jatavian Sanders could be saved here by a Rams pick, that's for sure. What do you
He
think?
could be.
What do you think the Commanders go here?
Well, who's up first? Is it Commanders or is it Rams?
Rams first, then Commanders.
Well, let's talk about the Rams first. I mean, I don't know that they necessarily need a speed guy. Like I said, they have DeMarcus Robinson. But if you want to be the Rams and go ahead and draft Troy Franklin, I don't hate it at this point, right? You get tremendous value. You get complete speed. We know Matthew Stafford is aging, so he doesn't necessarily have the arm strength that he once did when he was hucking it up, 2 decades ago to your boy Calvin Johnson. But Matt Stafford still can get it out to Troy Franklin, and he can be used as a yak guy, at least kind of, sending him on slants. He did that pretty well at Oregon as well. But yeah, if you get, a Troy Franklin in LA, or like we said, like a Jatavian Sanders, or even like a Cade Stover, right? Someone who's super capable, who is athletic for a tight end, and has the receiving chops. I mean, those are really interesting picks. I'd love to see an offensive weapon there. And then the last thing we mentioned is the Commanders. Get Jaden Daniels more weapons. We got him Ben Sinnott. We have Terry McLaurin there. If Troy Franklin's on the board for the Washington Commanders, I want him. I don't mind Javon Baker. I don't mind Tez Walker. Those are a couple of names right here in this range for Jaden Daniels. Get him weapons and help him succeed right away.
All right, the Rams select. One sec. Cameron Kitchens, safety out of Miami. So 1 pick left. So I've seen a couple of enjoyable tweets here. Matthew Friedman says there is a non-zero chance Ben Sinnott has a better career than Brock Bowers, and that makes me smile. I like that very much. That makes me smile very much. Then the other one I'm seeing a lot of, the winner of the day is, what the hell's his name? I forgot his name now. Running back in Dallas. What's the name I'm missing here?
Rico Dowdle?
Thank you. Whoever the starter is, allegedly. They're saying, is he the winner of the day? And I believe that with all these people tweeting that out, he is the winner of the day if you own him, because go sell him right now. Because I think the winner of the day is going to be Ezekiel Elliott when they sign him tomorrow. Because I fully believe they're bringing Zeke back and they're giving him the job at least 1 more year. I mean, I think they'll bring in someone day 3, but so we got 1 pick left. Washington on the clock, and then we'll call it a night so I can go take care of this sick kid.
For Washington too, we mentioned the wide receivers, but they have their tight end. But I wouldn't hate like a Jalen Wright here as well. That would be a really interesting pick for them. They lost Antonio Gibson, right? So it would be really interesting to kind of surround Jaden Daniels with the type of back that can leak out of the backfield and learn to kind of check down. And also kind of help him block on the run. Now, we know Wright is not a massive guy, not necessarily his skill set, but he's a super athletic guy. He's a home run hitter, as we've discussed. So Jalen Wright here for Washington, adding another weapon to Jaden Daniels and hopefully learning how to work with him in a mobile quarterback. I mean, that would be fantastic, I think, for him. And he did that somewhat at Tennessee as well.
Final pick is about to be in. It's funny because if you look back, round 1, we've seen 8 defensive players go. Second round, we've seen 20, and if this isn't a defensive player, it will be 20 in the 3rd round as well. So let's wait. The Commanders are announcing their final pick here on the clock, and it is – this lady takes so long. It is Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver out of Rice. Okay, so briefly discuss that before. I guess that's worth talking about before we call it a night.
Yeah.
So Troy Franklin slips to day 3, and Luke McCaffrey – in name alone, sees himself go as the last pick of day 3 to Washington. R.I.P. Jahan Dotson. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, Luke McCaffrey, we know he's brother to Christian. He's son of Ed.
You don't say.
These are both successful, in Christian's case, very successful NFL players. Ed McCaffrey had a long career. The problem for me with Luke McCaffrey is he's got absolutely no wiggle. He's got super stiff hips, and his route running needs to be developed, right? But he does have some nice speed. He does have the pass casting chops that the entire family has, and he's interesting and could develop. Certainly not as the number 2 target, because that's Ben Sinat's job for the long term. But the number 3 target, at least, he could develop into that. I don't think Luke McCaffrey is as good as Jahan Dotson is. Jahan Dotson still needs to prove it. But for me, Luke McCaffrey is probably off my board, other than kind of a dart throw in the early 4th. Like, I'm not taking Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd round, especially with a rookie quarterback.
I think the landing spot and day 2 draft capital at least keeps him in the conversation, as you are a double here on the Fast and the Furious movie set, apparently. But I think it at least keeps him relevant to the point where he'll be in the discussion. I'm not wiping him completely off my board. He's probably a 4th or 5th round pick. There's going to be a few guys he'll probably jump over, but I didn't have much interest, and I really don't. So it's been a long night. I've got a kid to take care of, and it looks like the sun has gone down in the war zone, Fast and the Furious you're living in, whatever the hell it is, Hollywood Jack over here. So let's call it a night. The guys are going to be back tomorrow. I'm not sure. Did you guys decide? I work all day. Do you know if they do? Oh, you're probably traveling, right? You're probably out tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm unlikely to be around, but we'll see, right, depending on time.
Well, you guys will have to check back in on the website then, or on Twitter. I think SC and Jesse were going to do something during the day. They might do some live streaming of day 3, but I am working and he is traveling home, so we will both be out. But check back tomorrow. At very least, I think I'm in tomorrow night for a recap. If the other guys don't already do a recap of day 3, I will, or if they do a recap of day 3, I will be on doing an IDP recap at the end. If not, I'll do the day 3 recap myself. But either way, head over to fantasyfootballuniverse.com, and thank you for tuning in to our late night. It looks really late there, man. It got dark all of a sudden, but all right, well, enjoy the end of your vacation. Safe travels, man. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care. Have a good night.